All right, so let's do some basic video editing, and then we're going to do a little bit of adding text and graphics, and then we're going to adjust this audio so that it's at a good level for a video, and then we're going to export this, okay? So there's a couple of different editing tools. We are only going to go over the super basic Razor tool for today because we're doing, critical video editing and just covering those basics today to get you through gathering clips, editing something, and exporting it, okay? So what I want to do is I basically want to, let's say I want to have the boat footage here. So maybe the story is that we're out on the boat, we're going to the place, and then I want to cut to the drone footage overhead. I want to zoom in to the footage of the cameras getting their film changed, and maybe we'll repeat the drone footage and the boat footage one more time. We only picked 3 clips because I didn't want it to be too complicated. So, all right, let's go ahead and make some edits. So I'm going to go into my boat footage, and I'm going to say I really only want to sit on this footage for about 7 seconds. So I'm going to go ahead and bring my scrubbing tool into the timeline, and I am going to choose this Razor tool. The quick key for it is C, but we're going to go ahead and click the Razor tool. I'm going to cut, and it's turned this video piece into two pieces. It's really kind of hard to see, but there's a little cut right there. You can see, like, when I hover over it, I can roll these pieces of footage with that little bar right there, which we'll get into a little bit later. But anyways, let's take this footage that I cut off, and I'm just going to move it down the timeline. I'm going to reuse some of it a little later, but not right now. Okay, so there's the boat. We're going to drag and slide the camera. No, we were going to do the drone footage next. So I'm going to bring the drone footage on over. And there we go. We cut to the drone footage. Now, one important thing to do in the middle of your project is to save your progress. A big mistake that people make in the beginning, we all do it. Don't worry if you do it, but you want to go to save. You want to save your progress. So I'm going to go ahead and save my project where it's at right now. All right. So let's save that. And then we will continue. Okay, so here we are. We've got the boat. We cut at about 7 seconds to the drone footage. I'm going to let that linger a little bit longer because I'm going to add some text over that later on. I'm going to cut that off. Now, let's say I want to just get rid of this little clip. I don't want it on there anymore. I'm just going to select it, and you can just delete it. Now, don't think that you're actually deleting the footage forever. These clips are very versatile, and you can see when you hover over the end, there's this little tool that pops up, and you can actually pull and extend your footage again if you want. So, like I was saying before, when you're working in Photoshop, not always, but a lot of times you're doing destructive editing, it saves the picture inside of your Photoshop project file with everything. That's not the case in Premiere. All Premiere is doing is we've imported these video clips to work with in Premiere. Premiere is just sourcing the file. So if you cut something, it's never permanent. It never destructs your original file. So I can cut that again, delete the end off of it, and then I can just pull it back out again if I want. And you can also adjust your clips this way. Like, you can just pull them in instead of using the Razor tool. It just kind of depends on your preferred workflow and what you're doing, okay? All right, so let's now bring our last clip of the hands changing the film in the cameras. And let's say I'm gonna go ahead and have this only show, let's say right when she gets it in there, we're gonna cut it. Okay, So cool. And then I'm going to bring this last piece of boat footage. Now, the only reason that I kept this, because I cut it and I didn't delete the back end of it, is that's one way to kind of keep track of what visuals you've used and haven't used. So like I could have just squished the end of this in, and then I could do something called duplicating it, or I could drag it down again and reuse it. But I know that if I cut it and separate it in the way that I did, where I cut it in the middle, drug the back end over here, I know that I haven't used this back end footage yet. So that's one reason to kind of just keep it on the timeline if you're going to use it. So let's have this be the longer shot at the end here. I'm going to cut that, and I am going to cut the end of it off. And we're at about 31 seconds now. So great. Very cool. So let's just say, of course, I'm not showing you storytelling and editing today. That would be way too much. So don't worry too much about the story of your video. That'll all come later, but we're just working on some technical things today. So we've got a boat coming in, all of these things. So boat, and then drone footage, and then this piece of footage here. Now, one thing we can do to make this a little more interesting is we can actually stack this up on top of itself twice and blow the back out. Sometimes you see this technique a lot on like news broadcasting and things like that. So it's not a necessary thing, but I wanted to show it to you just on a technical side of things so that you know how to do it. So what we're going to do is we're going to select this clip. We're going to go to edit and copy. We're going to come down the timeline a little bit past all the video, and we're going to paste. So you're going to go to edit and paste, or Command V. We're going to paste this identical clip down here. And then what I want you to do is I want you to just drag it and stack it on top of the other clip. So we have this clip on here 2 times. Now, these layers work like any other layers in any other kind of art editing software, visual editing software, design software. And whatever's on top, it's like a stack of papers. So whichever layer is on top is technically the one that's on top on your video. So we're going to leave the one on top alone. Let's go ahead and blow out the bottom, and we're going to give it a little bit of a blur. So we're going to use our first visual effect. So with the bottom clip selected, let's go over to scale here. And we're actually going to blow the scale up until it hits the sides here. And then you're going to see it's the same footage. So it fills in our visual background, and it's the same footage here, but it fills in the entire frame so it's not feeling, awkward. And actually I can see with that blown up all the way that I've cut off the top and bottom a little bit of my top layer. So I'm going to go ahead and select my top layer and just scale that up a little bit. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to add a blur to the lower level, and then we're going to bring the opacity down a bit. So we want this to be full, but we really want our viewer to be paying attention here. And this is all just kind of peripheral and aesthetics. So let's go ahead and we're going to go over to our effects panel. So here on your left side of the screen, you have your Project Premiere, and then next is effects. And we can actually just search for effects in this top search bar. So I'm going to have you type in blur. And what we're going to choose is the Gaussian blur. So you can take this and click on it and drag and drop it on your clip. Or I believe with the clip selected, you can double click it. But a lot of times I accidentally have the wrong clip selected and then I double click it and I have the effect on the wrong clip. So I like to drag and drop so that I know I'm putting it on the right one. So now you might be saying, great. I drug down Gaussian blur, I added it to the clip. Now what do I do with it? Nothing happened. Well, we also have this window called Effect Controls over here. And you can see that we have all of our motion controls here. And then it added Gaussian blur right here. So let's go ahead and under Gaussian blur, under blurriness, we're just gonna slide that up and we're gonna slide it to maybe like 30. And now you can see that it's blurred the clip underneath. Now, it's still a little bit too prominent, like it's a little bit too distracting from this central footage. So I also want to bring the opacity down. So we can change the opacity either in the effect controls or the properties panel. I think just for simplicity's sake, let's go back to the properties panel. With this clip selected, we're going to go to the opacity property and we're going to drag that down to, let's say 50%. So what we've done, and this is just elements and principles of composition and design, is we've created a background so that it aesthetically matches what's going on in the other aspect ratios, but we've blurred it and brought down the opacity so that this is still, in terms of visual hierarchy, the focal point for the viewer, okay? All right, so let's add a few more effects. Let's just do a couple of simple things. Let's go to this final clip here. And let's say that for whatever reason in my story, I actually need this clip to be in black and white. This is a common request from people, is how do I get, make it grayscale, essentially. So let's just search for the word black. And there's a lot of camera stuff with Blackmagic, but there's also an effect called black and white right here. I'm just going to click on that and drop it down onto this clip. And this by default will just change it to black and white. If I, with this clip selected, go over to my effect controls, you can see black and white is here. And this is a very simple filter, you guys. There's really nothing else to do. It just sort of changes it to black and white. So very simple. Let's go ahead and let's look for a filter called contrast, brightness and contrast. This is a typical filter you see in a lot of image manipulation software. So we're going to drop it on there. You're going to see in the effect controls panel here that brightness and contrast now appear at the bottom. And you can play around with brightness and contrast. That's usually a good one that goes hand in hand with black and white in order to flatten it out and make it less, lower the contrast or make the contrast more dramatic, whatever you want to do. Okay, some other effects in here. So let's X out our search. I do want you to see some of the presets that are in here. And I want you to look at the Lumetri presets. So these are some basic filters that you can just use. So here, let's go over to this clip because that's what we have selected. This will give you a little bit of a preview of what these might look like in terms of color. It looks like this one would give it quite a pop of color, but let's say we wanted more of here's a faded look. You can click down and see there's also different types of vintage film stocks and things like that. Here's different grayscales, so you can go to monochrome, geez, here. Under video effects, there's a lot of different kinds of effects going on here. Under color correction, you can see you can kind of play around with the tint and other types of color manipulations. So I'm just going to go I'm going to go to faded film and I'm going to choose that for this clip. And you can see it kind of gives it a bit of a vintage look here. So now we've got a couple of effects going on. Our first clip is as is, which is fine. This has a vintage effect, which you can see right here, has been added in the effect controls panel. We used our vertical footage and blew it out a little bit, gave it an aesthetic background there, but keeping the footage as the focal point, and then our black and white